Hi everyone, welcome to the next review session. This review will be on taxes, and we're going to focus on the effect taxes have on markets. So the first thing we need to cover is the type of tax we'll typically cover, and that is what type of tax? An excise tax. Excise tax is typically a per unit tax on a good. Now, the one thing you need to know about an excise tax, besides it per unit, you need to know that all taxes do what to, well, taxes in this construct with no externalities do what to efficiency? It decreases efficiency. And let's explain. Let's go ahead and add a tax, except this tax we're going to put it on, let's put it on suppliers. Every time a supplier produces a product, they have to pay a tax. That means we'd have to draw another what? Go ahead and start off with our equilibrium. But now we need to draw what? What other line? If we said it's a tax that you have to pay every time you produce an item, it's a tax on who? Suppliers. So we need to draw a new, except what would a tax on suppliers do? It would move the supply curve what way? It would move it to the left. So we draw our supply tax, and we now know that with the tax on it, the price is going to be where now? This is going to be our new price with the tax, and here's our new quantity with the tax. Well, that's not it. At this quantity, suppliers are only going to be out here. They don't see that tax, they just see the effects. They know that if we produce this quantity, we'll sell out of our good, and we're only going to get this much revenue. So I'll go ahead and put price in the revenue again, which means something is going to happen here. One is what's going to happen to the producer surplus. It will decrease. And we go to our original supply line, because this is what suppliers are seeing, and we shade this in here. And this is our producer surplus. It's clearly smaller than it was if it was right up here. What's going to happen to our consumer surplus? It has shrunk as well, because it's going to be right here. Okay? So that's where our demand goes. And what else has happened? We now have something called well, we have tax revenue. We call it the what? Starts with W. It's this thing right here. And what's it right here? And what's it doing? It is a wedge, okay? We call this our wedge because what does it do to the consumer and producer surplus? It splits them. So this green here is our tax revenue. So that's our tax revenue. And do we really mind that some money's tax revenue, some money up here is going to consumer surplus, and some is producer surplus? That's fine. What do we really not like about this? Yeah, right here, who's getting this benefit? No one. And therefore, taxes will give you a deadweight loss. Therefore, we would say an excise tax in this type of market is going to be what? Inefficient. And let's go ahead and do this really, really quick. And let's say now it's a tax that's going to be put on consumers. They need to pay this extra tax every time they buy something. What would happen now? What shifts? The demand curve is going to shift. And it's going to shift. Is it going to increase or decrease because of a tax? Decrease. I want you to think about this. This demand with our tax here means that when people buy something, they're seeing this price right up here, but they're only going to get, well, they're going to get this much benefit, but they'll pay this price. So our equilibrium, I'm sorry, here, let me just go ahead and get rid of this for one moment. Our equilibrium originally in this market would start here. And if we had to add the new demand curve, we would simply add our new demand curve, and we'll call this demand tax again. And we're going to have our little equilibrium right here, which means here's our new quantity. That's our quantity on the tax. However, people will pay this actual price up here. So this is what suppliers will get. This is what consumers are paying, which means if we go to start shading this stuff in, here's our consumer surplus again. Here is our producer surplus. And what do we have in the middle? The wedge, the tax revenue. So our tax revenue is right there, except what's the other thing that makes us inefficient? The deadweight loss. And because that deadweight loss, we know the market is what? Inefficient. And if you also notice, the two graphs look what? They look almost identical. Now the demand curve shifts instead of the supply curve. So do pay attention to which one changes. But if you notice, it has a very, very similar effect. So does it matter who the tax is placed on? No, the same effects will be there, and both sides will pay for it. Now, one other thing that we can focus on right here is our different types of taxes. All right. There are three different types of taxes you need to know. There's progressive taxes, regressive taxes, and a flat tax. Also, it's proportional. So, and what did I say? Proportional. Now, these types of taxes are important to know. A progressive tax is what the United States has. Since all taxes tax income one way or another, we view it how they tax income. So a progressive tax is going to tax wealthier people at a higher percentage. Let's say you make $1 million, you pay 40% of your income tax. But if you make 100,000, you might pay 35. You make 60,000, you'll pay 30. If you make 40,000, you'll pay 20. If you make 10,000, you'll pay 15%. So that means the more wealth you earn, the higher rate you will be taxed. The idea is it'll do what with the wealth of the country? It'll distribute it more evenly. What are some other taxes that would even out the income of a country? What other taxes could make a country's income inequality more equal?
Taxing luxury goods.
Ooh, very good. Taxing luxury goods, like big boats or planes. What else? Because who's going to pay that tax? Wealthy, and only if the wealthy do what? Buy those luxury goods. What else?
Property tax.
Property tax can affect a wide range of people. But what about an estate tax? People, when they die and give lots and lots of money to their kids, they go ahead and say, hey, if you're going to give over $1 million to your kids, half of that goes to taxes. Another one would be a gift tax. As in large gifts over a certain level, so not like if your parents bought you new roller skates, but a large tax like 20 or it's like 6,000 or more, you can have a high tax rate on that kind of stuff. So we would tax the wealthier and give that money then to who? The poor people in the effect of benefits and public goods that we'll get into later. So regressive taxes are a way to try to even the wealth. A regressive tax does just the opposite. It's going to tax the poor a larger percent of their income than the wealthy. So the poor might pay a 20% tax, where the middle class pays a 15, the upper class pays 10, and the really wealthy pay like 3%. Anyone want to guess an example of this? We have it in America, except you're going to have to put your thinking caps on for it. Very good. A sales tax. A sales tax is a regressive tax because a sales tax, you're only taxed when you do what? Buy something. Except what percentage of your income would a poor person spend on buying things? Pretty much all of it. Where someone who's middle class is going to spend how much of their income on buying goods and serving goods? What do they spend? All of it? No, they spend a proportion of it, maybe like 3/4 or half. What would a wealthy person spend on goods? An even smaller percent. What are they going to do with a lot of their income if you make $1 million a year? You're going to invest it and put it other ways. You're going to buy goods. So the poor people, even though sales tax is even for all people, the poor are going to pay a larger proportion of that of their income in that tax than they would than the wealthy. And we also have a proportional tax here. And a proportional tax is a tax that taxes everyone what? The same rate. So everyone pays 10% of their income in that tax. So that's what a proportional tax is. Pretty simple ways to view these. Pretty simple taxes.
Is an excise tax one of those three?
An excise tax would be a tax on per unit, and it could be per unit bought or produced. So it would be closer to a sales tax. Sales tax are typically percentages. This would be a flat rate of like $2 per item. So it'd probably hit the poor, it'd probably be a little bit more regressive. You won't be tested on that. But just so you know the different types, because different questions can ask, which would help with income inequality? And you would say what? Progressive tax would make the income more balanced. They would also say, what tax would rich people pay the least amount in? Regressive. Okay, proportional is just flat rate all the time. So, remember this percentage of income, not dollars each. Very rarely do you see people ever putting something up like that. So, because you have that taxes, let's say we have a tax situation, okay? Let's say we have a tax. So we tax the wealthy, and so we have a very big proportional tax, and we give it to the poor. What would that effects have on the markets or the economy? First off, where's the money going? A proportional tax, everyone would pay the tax, but poor would pay how much of that in tax? Very little. And the wealthy would pay a lot. Where would that money from the wealthy go? Mostly to the poor. They get the most benefits out of it. And what would happen to income inequality? Would that change? Yes, except would there be any other effects? Would that just solve all problems? We know taxes cause what?
Deadweight loss.
Right, they cause, and what deadweight loss is an example, it just shows what? Inefficiency. As in, if we take lots of money from wealthy people, we will take away some of their incentives to do what? Spend, buy, invest, those are all macro things, or simply earn income. If I don't get as much as I'm promised, I'll do something less. It's a low supply. I'll supply less of my efforts. But when people do things to earn money, benefits of trade occur, and who wins? Everyone. So they'll produce less, and therefore inefficiency will occur. So are taxes always a fix or a non-fix to a situation? No, they'll cause inefficiency, but they can solve a problem too. Which one? What's the right answer to that? Should you tax or not? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You got to get income somehow, but a tax will cause what? Inefficiency. That's all you need to know. So I'm not going to say vote this or vote that. It will cause inefficiency, but that money can be used, or it needs to be used for other things. All right, I hope everyone understands that pretty well, understands the charts, the deadweight loss, where money goes and comes from, and really does a good job on the test on this portion.